Hey everyone, Elena here. Revenge Shift delivers stories that leave you speechless. If you're here for it, hit subscribe and let's go. The doorbell rang at 9:47 a.m. on a Sunday. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, I saw my mother standing on my front porch in her church clothes, the navy Chanel suit she wore when she needed to feel important. Behind her stood a man in his 60s carrying a leather briefcase, and my father, arms crossed, wearing what I'd started calling his disappointed patriarch expression. I opened the door. "We need to talk about your house," Mom said, walking past me without waiting for an invitation. The man with the briefcase followed. Dad came in last, closing the door behind him with more force than necessary. "This is Richard Brennan," Mom announced, gesturing to the stranger now standing in my living room, examining my built-in bookshelves like he was appraising them. "He's a real estate attorney. We've retained him regarding a financial matter that affects this property." My stomach dropped, but I kept my face neutral. I'd learned that skill over 33 years of family dinners. "What financial matter?" Mom sat on my couch, the one I'd saved 18 months to buy, and placed her purse beside her like she owned the place. "We gave you $400,000 for this house. That was June 2018. Nearly 7 years ago." She paused, letting the number hang in the air. "A gift that substantial deserves equity consideration." Richard Brennan opened his briefcase and pulled out a document at least 20 pages thick. "Your parents have asked me to draft a deed modification that would add them as 50% owners of this property. Given their significant financial contribution to your home purchase, this is a reasonable request." I looked at my father. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "We're not trying to take anything from you, Maya," he said, using the tone he'd perfected when I was 12, and he'd explained why he couldn't attend my regional science fair because he had to watch my brother's baseball game. "We're just asking for what's fair. Half the money, half the house. That's mathematics." "The money from June 2018? I asked. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Dad nodded. $400,000. Wired directly to your account for the down payment. Without that money, you'd still be renting that apartment in the bad part of town." I turned to Richard Brennan. "Can I see that document?" He handed it over. It was professionally prepared, formatted on cream-colored legal paper. The deed modification would transfer 50% ownership to Linda and Robert Chin, my parents. There were signature lines already marked with those little "sign here" flags. They'd thought of everything. "We brought Richard today because we want to resolve this amicably," Mom said. "If you sign now, we can file everything this week. No lawyers for you, no unnecessary expenses. Just a simple correction of an oversight." An oversight. That was the word she chose. I set the document on my coffee table. "Actually, I need to show you something. Give me 1 minute." I walked to my home office, the room Mom had said I was wasting by not making it a guest bedroom for when they visited. I unlocked my desk drawer and pulled out a folder I'd labeled Family Financial Records 2015 to 2019. Then I opened my laptop and navigated to my encrypted cloud storage. When I returned to the living room, Richard Brennan was standing, checking his watch. "Miss Chin, if we could expedite this." "The wire transfer," I interrupted, opening my laptop on the coffee table so everyone could see the screen. "You said the money came in June 2018, right? $400,000. "You know it did," Dad said. "Don't play games." I pulled up my bank statement from June 14, 2018. There it was. A wire transfer for $400,000 from Robert Chin. But I zoomed in on something my parents had apparently forgotten about or hoped I'd never check. The memo line read, "Loan repayment, principal amount." The room went silent. "This shows a loan repayment," Richard Brennan said slowly, leaning forward to read the screen. "Not a gift." I opened my folder and pulled out a document. "This is the promissory note from August 2016. My parents needed $400,000 urgently. Dad's business partner had embezzled from their company, and they were about to lose their house. They came to me on a Tuesday night frantic. Mom was crying. Dad said if they didn't cover the shortfall by Friday, the bank would start foreclosure proceedings." I handed the promissory note to Richard Brennan. He studied it carefully, flipping through the pages. It was notarized. My parents' signatures were on every page. "I was 26 years old," I continued. "I'd been working in clinical trial data management for 4 years. I lived in a studio apartment and drove a 12-year-old Honda. But I'd been saving aggressively and had invested in index funds since my first job. I had $417,000 in liquid assets. Mom's face had gone pale. Why, I withdrew $400,000 from my investment accounts. Took a massive tax hit that year. Lent it to you with a repayment schedule of 36 months, interest-free. That was generous, considering you'd lose your house otherwise. The note specified that if you paid it back within 3 years, there would be no interest. If it went past 3 years, 5% interest would accrue annually. I pulled up another document on my laptop. You repaid the full amount on June 14, 2018. 22 months. No interest required. I had $11,000 in capital gains taxes that year processing the repayment funds, but I never mentioned it because I was just grateful you'd recovered financially. Richard Brennan set down the promissory note. Mr. and Mrs. Chin, did you bring any documentation showing this was a gift? Dad's jaw clenched. We're her parents. We gave her life. We raised her. That money was, it should be considered a loan, Richard Brennan said flatly. With a signed, notarized promissory note specifying repayment terms. Which was repaid according to those terms. Miss Chin, do you have the original note? I pulled it from my folder and handed it to him. He examined it, holding it up to the light, checking the notary seal. This is legally binding, he said. Miss Chin was the lender. You were the borrowers. The money you sent her in 2018 was debt repayment, not a gift. The memo line on the wire transfer confirms this. You have no legal claim to this property. Mom stood up abruptly. That's not, we're her parents. We wouldn't have been able to pay her back if we'd lost the house. She should be grateful we were even in a position to repay her. I am grateful, I said quietly. I was relieved you didn't lose your home. I never expected recognition or thanks for helping during your crisis. But I'm not signing over 50% of my house based on a false claim that you gifted me money. Dad turned to Richard Brennan. We're paying you to fix this. Mr. Chin, I'm an attorney, not a miracle worker. Your daughter has documentation proving you borrowed money from her and repaid it. That's not a gift under any interpretation of the law. If you proceed with trying to claim property interest based on this transaction, she could countersue for fraud and you'd lose. Decisively. We're family, Mom said, her voice rising. Family doesn't sue family. Maya, we raised you better than this. Something in me cracked. Not broke. I'd been broken and rebuilt too many times. This was different. This was clarity crystallizing into words. You raised me to keep detailed financial records, I said. Dad, you told me when I was 16 that I should document every transaction over $1,000 because people's memories change but paper doesn't lie. I followed your advice. I pulled up a spreadsheet I'd maintained for 17 years. Since I turned 16 and got my first job, I've tracked every dollar I've lent or given to this family. June 2002, I lent Alex $200 for car insurance. He never repaid it. December 2004, I gave Mom $500 for Christmas gifts for the family because her credit cards were maxed out. March 2007, I paid Dad's business insurance premium, $1,800, when his account was overdrawn. May 2008. Stop, Dad said. I'm not finished. July 2009, I paid for Alex's community college tuition, $4,200, because he'd forgotten to register until after the payment deadline and the late fees were adding up. November 2010. I said stop. Dad's voice cracked. November 2010, I paid for Mom's emergency dental work, $6,000, because Dad said the company insurance wouldn't cover it until January. April 2012, I covered 3 months of your mortgage when Dad's business partner was temporarily not paying his share. That was $9,200. December 2013. Why do you have all this? Mom whispered. Because you raced me to document everything, I repeated. The total, not including the $400,000 loan, is $67,340. I was never repaid for any of it except the big loan. I never asked for repayment. But I documented it all because that's what you taught me to do. Richard Brennan was staring at his own client. Mrs. Chin, did you know your daughter had lent you this much money? Mom's mouth opened then closed. She looked at Dad. That's not accurate, Dad finally said. Some of that was gifts. Between family members. I clicked to another tab. Here are texts from you, Dad, from March 2007. Can you loan me $1,800 for the business insurance? I'll pay you back next month when the Henderson contract comes through. The Henderson contract didn't come through. You never mentioned the $1,800 again. I never brought it up. I switched to another screenshot. Mom, here's your email from November 2010. Maya honey, I need help with emergency dental work. Can you loan me $6,000? I'll pay you back when Dad gets his bonus in January. He didn't get a bonus that year. The recession had hit his industry. I understood. I never mentioned it again. You were keeping score, Mom said, her voice trembling. All these years, you were keeping score like we were strangers. No, I said. I was documenting like you taught me. There's a difference. Keeping score means wanting revenge. Documentation means protecting yourself. I never threw any of this in your faces. I never demanded repayment. I helped when you needed help because you're my family. But I'm not letting you gaslight me into believing your loan repayment was a gift that entitles you to my house. Richard Brennan closed his briefcase. Mr. and Mrs. Chin, I can't proceed with this deed modification. You have no legal basis for the claim. If you want to pursue this further, you'll need to find different counsel, but I'd advise against it. You'd be wasting money on a case you cannot win. He handed me his card. Miss Chin, if your parents attempt any further legal action regarding this property, contact me. I'll be happy to provide a statement confirming what I witnessed here today. He left. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Dad sat down heavily on my couch. I didn't realize it was a loan. When we paid you back, I thought we were helping you buy a house. The promissory note was very clear, I said. It specified repayment terms, dates, and amounts. You both signed every page. That was during the worst period of our lives, Mom said. We were panicking. We weren't thinking clearly about legal terminology. The memo line on your wire transfer said loan repayment, I countered. That was 2 years later when your crisis was over. You weren't panicking in June 2018. Dad rubbed his face with both hands. Your brother said you wouldn't notice. He said people don't check old bank statements. Everything stopped. Alex. I said. This was Alex's idea? Mom looked away. He mentioned that the money you used to buy your house had originally come from us. He thought it was unfair that we'd helped you so much but had nothing to show for it. He suggested that we should have partial ownership since we'd made your home purchase possible. The pieces clicked into place. Alex needs money. Neither parent responded. He's in debt again, I said. He came to you asking for money and you don't have it, so he suggested you could mortgage my house or take a home equity loan against your supposed 50% ownership. Dad's silence was confirmation. How much does he owe? I asked. $40,000, Mom whispered. Gambling debts. He has until the end of next month. I walked to my window and looked out at the front yard I'd spent 3 years landscaping. The Japanese maple was just starting to bud. I'd planted it the week I moved in. I'm not helping him, I said. And I'm not signing anything that gives you ownership of my house. If you try to pursue this legally, I'll countersue for the $67,000 in loans you never repaid. I have documentation for everything. Texts, emails, bank statements, receipts. If you force me to become adversarial, I will win and you will lose more than just this argument. He's your brother, Mom said. He's a 40-year-old man who's never held a job for more than 8 months and who just tried to convince you to defraud me out of my home. I love him, but I'm not financing his self-destruction anymore. I turned to face them. I need you both to leave now. Take your attorney's card with you. Think about what you tried to do today. If you want to have a relationship with me going forward, it starts with acknowledging that you attempted to steal my house based on a lie about a gift that was actually a loan repayment. Dad stood. He looked older than he had an hour ago. Maya, we weren't trying to steal. Yes, you were. You brought an attorney with papers ready to sign. You tried to pressure me into giving you 50% ownership of my house based on money you owed me and repaid. If I hadn't kept records, if I'd been the kind of person who trusts family blindly, you would have succeeded. But I'm not that person because you raised me not to be that person. Mom picked up her purse. At the door she turned back. You'll understand when you have children. Family is supposed to help each other. I did help you, I said. I gave you $400,000 when you were about to lose your house. I gave you $67,000 over 16 years before that. I helped every time you asked. But help has limits, and those limits are called boundaries. You crossed mine today. They left. I stood in my living room for a long time after they'd gone, looking at the promissory note still sitting on my coffee table. My father's signature, my mother's signature, the notary's seal. Documentation. Paper trails. Evidence. The things I'd learned to keep because my family had taught me that people's memories change, but paper doesn't lie. 6 months later, my brother called from rehab. He was 3 weeks into a 90-day program, finally admitting he had a gambling addiction. He didn't ask for money. He said he was sorry for suggesting the house scheme to our parents. He said he was sorry for a lot of things. I told him I was glad he was getting help. I meant it. My parents sent a Christmas card with a note written in Mom's handwriting. We were wrong. We're sorry. We hope you can forgive us someday. I put it on my refrigerator next to my nephew's drawing of a dinosaur. I haven't seen them since that Sunday in June. They haven't asked to visit. I haven't offered. My house is still entirely mine. The Japanese maple has grown 18 inches. I refinanced at a lower rate in September, and my mortgage will be paid off in 11 years instead of 23. Sometimes I think about calling them. Then I remember the attorney with the briefcase, the papers with the signature flags, and the look on my father's face when Richard Brennan confirmed I'd documented everything. Trust, once calculated into real estate equity percentages, doesn't rebuild quickly. But my boundaries are solid now. Documented, notarized, and legally binding. Just like they taught me.